Hello everyone, this is Ms. Smith, and the purpose of this video is to discuss the communication process. Let's get started. Communication may seem effortless, like it just happens, but it doesn't. There are several steps in the communication process, and understanding these steps will help you improve your communication skills. It's especially important as you're being trained as a professional or a technical communicator to understand this process. So communication happens in 7 steps. We have the sender, the receiver, the message, the channel, feedback, barriers, and then the communication setting. So let's look at each of those steps in detail. The sender is the one who has a need to communicate and has some purpose to achieve. Okay? And so if you are communicating a message, you are the sender. You are the sender of that message. The receiver is the intended recipient of the communication. And the receiver can be one person, a group, an organization, etc. And so your receiver is essentially your audience. Okay? You're the sender, you're communicating to someone or to a group of people, and that group of people or that individual would be the receiver. Then you have the message. And it's exactly as it sounds. The message is the information or idea that needs to be sent from the sender to the receiver. Pretty straightforward thus far, right? We also have to consider the channel. The channel is the method or means used to communicate the message. So let's say, for example, you're driving and you have a flat tire and you pull over on the side of the road and you send a text message to your sibling and ask them to come and pick you up. In that scenario, you would be the sender, your sibling would be the receiver. The message you're sending is the message that you've had a flat tire and you need them to come and pick you up. And let's say you're using your cell phone to send that message. Your cell phone would be the channel. Your cell phone would be the method or means that you're using to communicate the message. We also have to consider feedback. The feedback is the response the receiver gives the sender. Okay? And oftentimes there is a response, especially in face-to-face communication. And so feedback is the response that the receiver or the audience gives to the sender of the communication. Now this is important. We have to consider barriers to communication, things that can get in the way from our message going forth in the way that we intended. Okay? Barriers can hinder effective communication. And so barriers can be internal or external. Internal meaning within the sender or receiver. Okay? And so for example, let's say you are upset at your sibling. Okay, let's just use that example. And you have a negative attitude toward your sibling and they ask you, can I please borrow your car for something? Okay, if you are upset with them or if you have a negative attitude, that's going to hinder, the effectiveness of what they're trying to accomplish. Sometimes exhaustion can be a barrier that's internal. If you've worked all day and gone to classes all night and you're just really exhausted, when you get home, you probably don't want to listen to people in your household tell you every detail of their day that day, right? You probably just want to go rest. And so exhaustion can be an internal barrier to communication. And also lack of knowledge. Maybe you don't know something about a topic and you really can't participate in that communication because you need to know more about it in order to be able to participate. Okay, and if we're thinking about that triangle we looked at, the technical writing or the professional communication triangle, remember, lack of knowledge is something that's always assigned to the audience in that model. You're the informed writer, so you have the information, and then your audience will always know a little less about it than you do, okay? Which is why it's important that you communicate very well to your audience, to your receiver. Then we have to consider external barriers to communication. And these are barriers that can come from an outside source, okay? So for example, a noisy room. On OC Tech's campus, if you're ever taking classes on campus, you may notice that some of the rooms are noisy. It might be our HVAC system or something, but some of the rooms have just kind of a buzz in it, and you have to kind of talk over it. And so a noisy room can hinder communication, right? Can keep you from hearing what's being said. Or let's say you have to send an email to people at your job and your computer breaks down. And so that's definitely a barrier to the communication going forth. And the final step we need to consider in the communication process is communication setting. And this is the environment in which the communication takes place, or the circumstances that you find yourself in where you have to communicate. And you have to consider this. Okay? So the setting includes any factor, physical or non-physical, that impacts the situation. So for example, if you know your boss just came from traffic court or from a 3-hour meeting with his or her bosses, right? And let's say they're frustrated. This might not be the best time to ask for a raise, right? You may want to wait for a different set of circumstances, a different communication setting that would hopefully make your communication a little bit more effective, okay? And so, if we just kind of scroll back up here for a second, the 7 steps in our process again are as follows. You have the sender, the receiver, the message, the channel, feedback, barriers, and then the communication setting. And whenever we communicate, regardless of whether we're talking to someone in person, talking to them via phone, or whether we're communicating in a document or in an electronic manner, we always have to consider that when we communicate, these processes are happening behind the scenes. And to be an effective communicator, you have to understand this and understand ways to overcome some of those barriers that may present themselves. Hopefully, this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know.